It is yet again that time of week where I get to review the story of Pedro Pascal playing a bounty hunter in a failed fascist state world who ends up becoming the surrogate father to a young child with special abilities that he was chosen to protect for his job. No, not that one, the other one. No, not that one, the other one. Okay, now you're just with me. Hello interwebs, I am here to review the latest episode and the season premiere of the show that started off the Pedro Pascal Renaissance Star Wars The Mandalorian, Season 3, Episode 1, The Apostate. My little Pedro Pascal heart is just growing 3 sizes today, but anyways, I have to tell y'all, I have been really looking forward to this season of The Mandalorian. Being honest, I have been one of the more people that has been, not negative, but a bit more tepid on The Mandalorian. Not because I didn't like it. In fact, there's a lot that I love about The Mandalorian, especially when it captures that, like, adventure, just having fun in the Star Wars universe feel. I think it does it so well, but I was a bit more down on it when it became sort of the cameo tying into larger Star Wars lore show, and that felt a little bit more like cynical Disney kind of vibe to it, even though some element of me was like, yeah, give me the dopamine hit of the nostalgia. And I kind of was feeling more and more that way when we got into things like the Book of Boba Fett, which was kind of and also became Mandalorian Season 2.5 for a weird little bit. And then we got to Obi-Wan, which I had elements of that I really loved, but that show overall was kind of blah. But then Star Wars Andor came along and it just reignited my Star Wars love and excitement. And then going into seeing all the hype for this season of the show, I was really excited because it felt like this season was going to double down on that focus of the adventure element that I really loved about previous seasons of Mandalorian, and kind of hopefully focus more in on that and the universe that it was building in and of itself, as opposed to sort of this cynical sort of feeling to it. And I hope that it was learning the lessons from Andor will also bring its own level of fun that Andor, being a much more like a politically didactic show and a much darker show, couldn't really do. And being frank with you, I think this season premiere nailed everything that I wanted this season premiere to do, and, you know, showcased to me that the show can still bring that fun adventure feel, and has now gotten to the point where it doesn't need to rely on the sort of larger, like, you know, here's Luke Skywalker stuff that it was really heavily leaning into in season 2, but focusing in on the universe that it's built out for itself with its own characters, and yes, relating to some characters like we see with spoilers here, Bo-Katan, but in a way that feels much more part of the story being told, as opposed to, hey, look, there's this cameo coming in. And I just really loved it. Not only that, I have to say right up front, this was freaking gorgeous. Like, Star Wars on Disney Plus has been generally pretty good, but I haven't loved the sort of like the like CGI wall look that Star Wars and also Star Trek has kind of been using a lot lately, because it always felt kind of very empty, flat, and wide open spaces. But Andor, again, proved to me that Star Wars can deliver the goods visually by having physical sets. And while there are a lot of digital sets going on here in this episode of The Mandalorian, it felt much more fleshed out and real and practical in so many different ways, and it just made it look absolutely stunning, like just visually vibrant in a way that the more like fascist state that we're seeing in Andor couldn't be. That fits Andor quite a lot. Like, I love Andor a bunch. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. But this gets to be a little bit more fun and swashbuckly, and it brings that visually as well. And I was just loving it. And then on top of that too, before we get into the specifics, I adored the cuteness of it all. Like, the show has really figured out like the cute element of everything, and it does it not just with Grogu, who is absolutely adorable throughout this whole thing, but also with Mando himself. But there's just so much cuteness going on that I just had a lot of fun with it. The one thing I have to say before we get into just the specifics and going over the episode itself is I'm curious to see the reaction of people who are, you know, big fans of The Mandalorian, but haven't been watching the rest of the Star Wars Disney Plus universe, and are coming into this season of the show being like, wait, When did Grogu get back with Mando? I thought he was off with Luke and hasn't watched like the Book of Boba Fett to see the mini season of Mandalorian that came along with that show in a weird way. Because it didn't bother me. It felt like a natural extension of what was happening in that show, but it would be just weird to just be someone who's not watched that and be like, what happened? The whole emotional crux of the end of last season is now just dealt with, apparently, in a whole other show. So I'm just curious to see if you were one of those people, or to see the reaction online of people who were that. Because it works for me, but I'm the big Star Wars nerd who watches everything. So I'm just curious to see what other people's reactions are, because it'll be different than my take, obviously. Anyways, let's get into my Pedro Pascal fandom, or otherwise the rest of the review of this episode. Sorry, I was along with the rest of the internet, I guess. I've just been falling in love with Pedro Pascal more and more as every day passes. It's really by minute at this point. But we start off the episode seeing a Mandalorian ceremony, where they are sort of putting this helmet on a young kid who I thought initially was like a young Mando getting his Mandalorian armor, but it turns out it's actually taking place in the present day. And this is cool to see because it reinforced the concept that I think will be a large part of this season, and has been over the show generally, but will be a driving factor here, is that Mandalorians do not take off their helmet, at least this sect that Mando is a part of. And so seeing the ceremony and seeing like the care and attention and pomp and circumstance that this group of Mandalorians puts into it was a nice reiteration of that. And it did lead to this big like lizard alligator thing attacking them, which was stunning visually. Like the whole fight sequence was awesome. And I initially balked at it when I thought that this was a flashback, because I'm like, why would you have your ceremony at the right next to the alligator space? Like, plan your ceremonies better. But then I remembered when we saw that Mando coming in with his nostalgia ship, prequel nostalgia ship to save everybody. That because they had sort of been diaspora'd at the end of, I think, season 1 or season 2. They may not have had time to secure the area as well as they would have liked, or have known that this alligator thing was going to be a problem. So that makes sense to me, and it was just a cool like action sequence to start off the season. Looked amazing, gorgeous, loved it just on a pure visceral level. But it did lead to the scene where Mando goes and visits the armorer, who we just saw last in Boba Fett, who sort of made him an apostate for taking off his helmet. And it sort of reiterates this point that we learned in that season, that he to be able to become part of this group again, he needs to bathe in the mines of Mandalore, which to many people's minds no longer exists because the Mandalore was destroyed during the, I believe, the Clone Wars, at the end of that TV show, I believe is when it happened. Maybe it was during the Empire. I forget the exact timeline of it. People will correct me in the comments, I'm sure. But anyways, they think that it's no longer exists, but he has proof that it might, and so he might be able to go and re-earn his honor, so to say. And the armorer reinforces this. So I love this because it gives us a clear goal for the season that is very much focused on Mando, because the past few seasons have more tied into Grogu and the mystery of Grogu and the larger like connections to the Star Wars universe, whereas this is definitely connecting to the Star Wars universe in the sense that it's tying into Mandalorian stuff, which we've gotten a lot in like the animated shows, but it's not tying into the grander lore, and it's also a shift from Grogu to Mando's specific journey, which I just like that being a subtle difference in the sort of what presumably will be the main arc of the season. I really enjoyed that as an idea. But then we have them going off of the planet, and we get to see Grogu seeing the Force Whales from Star Wars Rebels. I like seeing that reiterated here. And they go to Navarro, which is the planet from Season 1, and we get to see how this planet has changed since then. It's less dystopic, post-fascist empire, and has become sort of its own thriving center. And this was wonderful to see. Again, I loved the sets. I loved the alien designs. It looked gorgeous, and it was nice to see part of the Star Wars universe that wasn't like scum and villainy, but was thriving and kind of seeming like to be improving after the fall of the Empire. I thought that was just a cool shift to see in a way that we haven't really seen too much within the Star Wars universe. Usually it's like failed fascist state or a fascist state that we get to see, and here it's nice to see something on the upswing for once. So that was really nice. And then we get to see Carl Weathers come back, and he is now leading the sort of colony here, the city here, this port, I guess I should say. And I loved seeing his report rapport with Mando, and this is what I was talking about. Like, I love that this show is now building out and relying on its own universe rather than like, here's a reference to this character, here's Luke Skywalker, here's all this. It's building out these relationships, and I like him sort of saying like, hey, I owe you one, come in here, stay with us, you can live out your life off the fat of the land, I'll give you a nice little spot here. But Mando's like, no, I got a mission, I got something that I care about, and he sort of like talks him into letting him use the Taika Waititi droid, the IG droid, and sort of resuscitate him. And I did like, my initial fear was with this storyline was like, I liked seeing Taika Waititi and the IG droid, and I like that Mando has this like emotional tie to the droid to want to bring him back to life, and he doesn't trust any other droids to do this mission with him on because he's so fearful of other droids, and this one has earned his trust, this specific one. It's the only one he wants to work with. So I like that element of it, but I was sort of like, it would negate the sacrifice that droid had at the end of season 1 by bringing him back really easily. And I like that we do get the fact that he can fix the IG droid, but it still has the original programming to want to kill Grogu. And so he still has to go and find, pieces to bring back the IG droid. It's not going to be an easy fix. It is going to require some work on his part. So we get little side missions within this, which just fits part of the adventure plot. And I think that'll be really, really fun to see that. I also liked the return of the Babu Frick aliens, and Mando just being like a big dude in their little tiny hut was adorable. Bringing back the one original thing from Rise of Skywalker that people all generally liked. It was just nice to see that sort of tying in there. And we also get these pirates who were also cool looking. I loved the makeup effect on them. Not that Star Wars makeup, even on Disney Plus, has been bad by any means, but these looked gorgeous, especially as we see later on the sort of pirate captain, the sort of like Davy Jones, like seaweed monkey pirate guy, looked wonderful. I loved that design. It was so unique and clever. I adored that. But anyways, they're just causing trouble, and they're sort of like the mini bosses and will probably be a thorn in Mando's side throughout the rest of the season. If anything, I could say they were a little bit forced in terms of like an antagonist and creating a problem that will probably be recurring throughout the season, but I had enough fun with them in these few moments that I'm willing to let it slide. That it's like, yeah, it's a little bit forced to create a conflict and sort of something for Mando to fight against and have a little bit of an action beat, but they're fun. And I'm here for them. Just designs alone, I think they're cool looking. So I'm willing to be a little bit more forgiving of them because they were enjoyable. Maybe if these characters had appeared in Andor, where, I am paying a little bit more attention to like the nitty gritty of how the plot all interconnects, I'd be a bit more critical. But this show is meant to be, I'm not going to like not talk about the plot, but it is meant to be a little bit more fun. So these more frivolous elements add to that. I think I'm a bit more open to in this show than I would be in like Andor. Oh, also mentioning some cute things, I adored that Grogu was like spinning in the chair and like using the Force to like grab food. That was very, very cute. Trying to eat the Babu Fricks as like a pet was also cute. And then also when they left the planet where Mando is teaching Grogu how to fly the Starfighter was also really adorable. And then we get, like I said, the sort of action sequence where we get to see Mando sort of running away from the pirates. Again, this was fun. Looked gorgeous. Loved the action and visuals here. Again, a bit of a frivolous action sequence overall, but just looked fun. I enjoyed it. It hit all the dopamine factors that I wanted from a sequence like that. So, again, if I was being a bit more like, let me nitpick this apart, I would be more critical. But here, I'm just having fun and enjoying myself. But then this brings us to Mando going to see Bo-Katan at a Mandalorian castle. And I liked the sort of like stilted dialogue that these two characters have. It felt a little bit stiff, but that is because these two characters kind of have that very stiff relationship, and we see that Bo-Katan, played wonderfully by Katie Sackhoff, is disillusioned after the events of season 2 and having not earned the Darksaber and how people abandon her. So she's like, I don't care anymore. Do what you want to do. You're the weirdo that wants to go and do this. You go do it. And I like this sort of starting place for her characters. I'm sure she'll get drawn into this adventure as the season goes on. So I like this sort of disparate starting place, and that she's just a disillusioned person who's like, yeah, fine, do whatever you want to do. You go do it. I thought that was a nice beginning place for her. So overall, this was just fun. Like, I enjoyed watching this. It seemed like a good start off for the season that just really understood what made the best elements of previous seasons of The Mandalorian work, in that It's best when it's a fun adventure show that's building out its own little corner of the Star Wars universe and doesn't necessarily need to tie into all the grander events. Now, I'm sure we'll build to stuff like that when it comes to the Mandalorian arc, but I hope it stays at that level. Like, maybe we get to see Sabine and other characters, but we don't need to tie into the larger events like Ahsoka or Luke. Have them be sort of separate. Not that I don't want them to appear from time to time, but I don't need them to become a cameo machine. And here, I think this premiere understood that, and if it stays that course, if it stays on that road, I will be very excited and pleased with the direction of the season because we have a good story in front of us. So that's my thoughts on the latest episode of the Pedro Renaissance we got going on here. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it. But what did you think of Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Beyond all of that, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.